Yeah, could someone make a motion to suspend the rules so we can meet virtually, please?
I will
I'll move.
move and the rules so we can meet virtually.
Okay, and a second. Okay, great. And Anna will do a roll, call the vote, roll call here.
Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
Aye.
Joanne Salome,
Aye.
Kathy Feingold,
Aye.
Lauren Berlin,
Aye.
Monica Bobo,
Aye.
Councilmember Heracariz.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you very much. And now a motion to approve the minutes of our December 13th, 2022 meeting, please.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Okay, and the roll call.
Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Heracariz,
Aye.
Kathy Feingold,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
Aye.
Joanne Salome,
Aye.
Lauren Berlin,
Aye.
and Monica Bobo.
I abstained because I wasn't at the last meeting.
Right, great, thanks.
Motion passes.
Okay, well, thanks, everybody. So do we have members of the public who have signed up to talk with us?
Yes, we do have one person that signed up for public comment, but I do not see them in the attendees. However, somebody just signed up by raising their hand. If anybody in the audience would like to provide public comment, they can raise their hand with the button at the bottom of their screen, and we will allow them to provide comment in the order they raise their hand. So Tina Payton wishes to provide public comment.
Okay. Hi, Tina.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Happy New Year. I don't know when it's time to cut off that, but I will still say it.
Right, yeah. We
Happy New
appreciate.
Year.
So I know that you all are going to make up new rules and policy for the landlord tenant ordinance and other ordinances to pass. I hope that you include the landlord in this process. Frequently, the landlord gets overlooked, and this rules that you pass an ordinance involves us. And you do things that ends up hurting the landlord. I can speak for myself. That's not quite appropriate. And then you make people like me who is trying to help affordable housing, which you claim you're concerned about, then we feel like we don't want to work with affordable housing anymore, based on some of the laws that have been passed in other states that I know that you all are considering. So I hope there's a discussion. I don't know how you'll do it, but I hope there's some kind of discussion with new ordinances and policies that you're passing. Also, of course, you know, I always advocate for myself and other small landlords. It's very disappointing that here we are in January 2023 with no support. You have cut me out of any hopes of any money. And I don't see anything moving forward. I will say again, I feel very slighted and upset that somehow people think that being a landlord is not a business. And I see all these businesses getting $500,000, $650,000, $1 million. So which are you concerned about, the restaurant or affordable housing? Which one is more important to you? Because right now it looks like a restaurant and retail, the bookstore just got 80,000. Which is really important here? So your future actions of this year and your support or non-support of persons like me who provide units for many years. I just did a chart or working on a chart, and out of 16 units, 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom, over the last approximately 20 years, we have provided 75 families, almost 300 people, units, more than some of your luxury apartments in total. So remember that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Tina. And tonight on our agenda is, I think, really just a discussion about how we're going to work on the landlord tenant ordinance. So your comments are timely in terms of reminding us to include the landlords in the discussion. So thank you. Anybody else, Marion?
We do have Carlos Sutton that signed up for public comment. I don't believe he's here, but he was, and I'm just going to double check to make sure I'm stating this correctly. He was in favor of the proposed change to the threshold of 35 for the small landlords
Okay.
program.
Mhm.
And then we have another person that raised their hand, Jonathan Tuber.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jonathan Tuber. I'm a Evanston resident, and I'm also a board member of the Housing Opportunity Development Corporation, HODC. And I just want to briefly comment, I'm very encouraged by the staff recommendation for the motion tonight for approval of funding for 1805, 1815 Church Street. And as a board member of HODC, I'm highly encouraged by the transparency of the organization to present such a thorough case alongside Mount Pisgah and do the legwork for the overwhelming majority of the funding from other sources. And I want to just encourage consideration of the motion on the table. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that would close our public comment at this time.
Okay, great. Well, then let's move on to our business items for this evening. So first, just to get us started, could we have a motion just so we can begin to talk about it? A motion to recommend approval of the $4 million as gap funding for the HODC mixed use project at 1805, 1815 Church Street.
So moved.
And a second, please. You have a second?
Did we get a second?
I don't think so.
Oh, I'll second.
I'll second
Great.
it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So we had information in our packet, and do we have another staff presentation about that?
Not necessarily. Oh, it looks like, I don't know if Carly Sutton apparently just literally joined now. Do you want to maybe hear his public comment?
Well, since he was wanting to comment about, I believe about the small medium landlord program, why don't we hold his comment until
That sounds good.
Okay.
Yes, so for the HODC project, we have Richard Koenig from the Housing Opportunity Development Corporation that is here to speak about the project.
Mhm.
We also have Paul Zamazak, Economic Development Manager, that is present to answer any question related to economic development for this project.
Mhm.
And there are slides that Anna's going to be sharing just to give a quick visual review of what this project is, since that might help with the committee's understanding of this project.
Mhm. Great. Okay.
And I am just going to double check that. Okay, yes. So Richard was able to join this.
We saw him just a minute ago.
I'm just, okay, good. So I'm going to give a quick, and if you want to move to the next slide, I'm just going to give a very, very quick highlight. I'm sure Richard's going to be able to talk to the project in much bigger detail, but that's just to provide context about what we're talking about. So This is the site that we are talking about. This project included a city-owned vacant lot as well as church-owned lot, and there's essentially been historically a potential land swap between the church and the vacant lot and the project for HODC, so that the church could be relocated in a better location for them with a new building, and the affordable housing project could be located closer to where the existing church is currently. So on the next slide, you can see this is the urban context that was provided. There was a vacant lot from the city that was located at 1805 Church, I believe. Next slide, please. This is a visual of the project that we're going to be discussing today. This is the specific affordable housing building that HODC funding request is pertaining to. There are two different projects. There's the church and then there's the affordable housing building. Those are two completely different projects, differently financed. What we're talking about tonight is the affordable housing building with the retail at the ground floor, as you can see on the picture. And then just to give you the context and a kind of broader view on the next slide, it kind of shows you the totality of the site with, on the left, the proposed housing building, and then on the right, the church building. And then next slide, what it looks like in context of the actual corner of the intersection. So in the front, you can see the new church, and right behind that is the affordable housing building that we are discussing tonight. With that said, Richard, if you would like to maybe provide a little bit of a quick introduction to the project.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Again, my name is Richard Koenig. I'm the Executive Director of Housing Opportunity Development Corporation. We're a nonprofit organization that develops affordable housing throughout the northern suburbs. The organization has been around for 40 years, and we have completed about 500 units of affordable housing and over 30 developments in 18 different communities. So we have quite an amount of experience having put projects like this together. We're excited to work with the city and Mount Pisgah Ministries on this proposal. The city itself had done a request for proposals back in January of 2020, right before things went a little bit crazy. And we have been working with Mount Pisgah to try and figure out the best way to redevelop that block. The proposal that we came up with would create a mixed use project in the middle of the block. The idea was that we would, the church would swap land and take the corner lot with the same amount of land that they have now currently and build a new church. And in the middle of the block, we would construct a new 5-story building with retail on the first floor and 4 floors of residential above. The 4 floors of residential will include a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, and all 44 units would be available and affordable to households earning less than 60% of median income, with a portion of units set aside for households below 50% of AMI. And the rents on all those units would be affordable for a minimum of at least 30 years. So we would try to make sure that that's affordable for the long term. And of course, as a nonprofit, it's our mission to keep that housing so it would be affordable for many, many years beyond that. And HODC has continued to do that with all of our existing affordable buildings. So we are currently have permission from the city to negotiate with the purchase regarding the acquisition of the land. We have applied to the Illinois Housing Development Authority for financing for low-income housing tax credits and have been approved for those. And so there's still a gap on the financing. And so what we're requesting tonight is funding from the city to fill up a portion of that gap. As you know, costs are extremely expensive on doing new construction right now. We really wish that costs could be lower, but affordable on the operating side does not mean affordable on the development side. We do pay market rates for construction. We pay union wages. We do pay for quality construction materials. And so the cost of construction is what it is. We have a team of experienced, it's really experienced putting these projects together and are excited about the opportunity to try and help revitalize this area and build this new building that would create affordable housing for the long term and really be an asset to the community. So happy to answer any questions or provide any other details that I can. That's sort of the overview of where we are right now. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I am. Ugo, would you go ahead with your question?
Thank you. Actually, I have a couple of questions for that. But first, I would like to say hello to Richard. Richard, you and I met a ton of moons
It's been a
ago
few
at
years
the
ago.
Edgewater Community Council.
Yes,
And I don't think you remember me because
I
I was there
do.
briefly. Good to see you again. And
Good to
thank you
see
so
you.
much for keeping on working on behalf of our communities. And I appreciate that immensely. I do have a couple of questions, though. I was reading the proposal as staff presented it to us. And my questions are, the rents that are shown on the graph of income and expenses towards the bottom, and it was very small script, so I had to
Yes.
kind of enlarge it quite a bit, seemed to me to reflect way below market rents. And I know that when either Cook County or the Illinois Department of Housing
Right.
issues vouchers, they pay some very close to market rent. So I was wondering why your estimates are so low, and I didn't know I was going to see you. So so why are your rents so low? That's one of my questions. And then my other part of the question has been answered, though, either on the presentation or on the submission of staff. So I'll leave my question on that for it, but I have some other questions about the presentation that staff sent to us in terms of where the funds come from and how are they formatted, and something that I don't understand, and I just would like to have clarity before we come to passing of this as
Right,
a committee.
right. Yeah. So Richard, would you like to answer the question that was directed to you, and then we can deal with
Sure, absolutely. Right. So, I mean, our goal is to serve households earning below market income, below market, that can afford below market rents. And so the goal is really to structure those rents so that people earning close to minimum wage, or what's proposed minimum wage of that $12, $15, $20 an hour, can afford to pay those rents at 30% of their income. So whereas the Housing Authority Cook County allows those rents to be higher when units have vouchers, when the units don't have vouchers and the family itself is responsible for paying the full amount of rent, the goal in order to serve those households making that level of income, we structure those rents so they pay the full amount of rent, but that full amount of rent is something they can afford at their current income level.
If I could follow up on that, and it is that a pretty large percentage of the residents as proposed will be voucher holders. So it's still then I'm still a little confused on where is really that amount of rent
there would be,
reflect.
right, so there would be no more than 25% of the units would have vouchers. 75% of the units would not.
That's conflictive to what I understood from what I read, but I'll go into it later then, and I'll try to read it again. Thanks for that.
I believe the 25% number was what we stated in the memo. It's a little bit confusing because there's a number of units with a certain income level, and then on top of that, there's certain of those units that have vouchers. But I believe 25% of the units in the memo are marked as receiving vouchers.
The way IDA has its application, it's sort of complicated. Those are the really, really small numbers that comes directly from the application. So I'm sharing the same numbers with everybody. So you're seeing the same numbers that IDA saw. But reading those numbers, it's sort of a complicated chart that they put together, but it's structured so that no more than 25% of the units would have the vouchers, and the rest of the rents would be fully paid by the tenants. So at least 75% by tenants who are living and paying that amount of rent.
Okay.
Okay. Lauren, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm Lauren Berlin, and my housing experience is mostly on the home ownership side, not on rentals. So excuse me if this is a question I should know, but I'm just very curious based on if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly. I'm curious given that vouchers allow you to potentially have higher rents, and given that you want this to be long-term affordable, why is there why is the minority of the units going to be to voucher holders as opposed to 50, 70? Like I could just see it penciling out very differently if you could raise those rents with voucher holders.
Sure. I mean, number one is there just aren't that many vouchers available.
Mhm.
And the goal really is to be able to serve households with lower incomes without the vouchers.
Yeah.
So we underwrite it so that it is affordable, whether the vouchers come and go. And we also don't want a predominance of vouchers in the building. There's sort of, that's just a policy that we have is people talk about buildings being entirely vouchered. So the goal is to create housing where the rents you can afford, where you earn the income. You have a job paying in that $15 to $20 an hour range, and you can afford that with by being able to pay this amount. And it has not, we don't need the vouchers to make it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes total sense. I was just curious. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, let's turn to the financing question. And I know we have Paul Zalmazak here. Maybe Paul should go next to talk about the TIF funding and all that part of the project.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Paul Zalmazak. I serve the community as the Economic Development Manager. I'm glad to be here tonight. Thank you for the invitation. So, I mean, there are a number of ways I understand that we can approach funding this through TIF or other city sources, but Marion, I'll need you to back me up on this. When we collaborated late last week, we had a structure where I believe we were bringing in a potential $3 million of TIF. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Marion.
Yeah, that's correct. 3 million of TIF and then 1 million from the Affordable Housing Fund, with the understanding that what we're asking tonight is an approval on the total amount, and that there could be some further conversation on actual funding sources, because there is a potential for ARPA funding to replace a certain amount of the TIF.
Thank you. So I wanted that to be specified, because you know, I do want to stress that we do have the TIF in place. When we brought this forward to the Economic Development Committee and City Council under the previous administration, and even under the current City Council, this had been a priority and has been in the pipeline to be funded with some level of TIF. It's an important project. We, as you know, because it was already summarized in this call or in this meeting, we went to the marketplace with an RFP. We've gone through a very long process. It's been ongoing for months and months. And Richard, I know Richard Koenig literally takes calls from aldermen or council members at 11 p.m. I've seen it. We've been working hard. So we as staff are really recommending that we hold tight and keep this as a top priority. So, and I'm stressing this for a reason, and Sarah, I'll let you jump in just a second. I want to stress that once we commit that $3 million from the West Evanston TIF district, and we accommodate some of the infrastructure planning that's already underway in that TIF district, including lead pipe replacement, water main improvements in the West End, et cetera, we are going to really have this TIF tapped out. There will not be additional funds for other projects. That's only just underlining the fact that we have to hold to our priorities, and we recommend as staff that this is a top priority. So I'll pause because I do see Interim Director Flax with her hand raised.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to point out a couple of things that we haven't really talked about, and we didn't put in the memo, but that I think are important things for the committee to know about too. Originally, our RFP, of course, covered the properties that the city owned, and those are the corner of Church and Darrow, and then the 2 lots immediately north of that go all the way up to the alley. And one of the real benefits of HODC working with Mount Pisgah is this enabled the flip-flop of the properties with the apartments being farther to the west and Mount Pisgah being on the corner actually implements some aspects of the West Evanston Master Plan, which I think are important, and that is the corner was really meant to be, and it's in the plan as an iconic building. And one of the categories of buildings that falls into that are churches. And so interestingly enough, if we had had the apartments right on that corner, we would be asking for more variances and changes from the West Evanston Master Plan. And so I think it's a really creative way of using property, but also of having two organizations that have done a great deal in our community to continue to expand their mission, because Mount Pisgah had its goal of rebuilding its church. And this repositioning of the buildings, I think, really is a better overall design and use of space from a standpoint of overall planning. So I just wanted to let people know about that. It's not something we've talked about before with this committee. The Land Use Committee Commission had to understand some of it because both projects are going to that commission at the same time and talked about the land swap. So I just wanted to bring that up for the committee. And one of the things that Marion mentioned is a possibility of using ARPA funding for this. I wanted to remind council members who would have last September, when we had an ARPA update, one of the things we talked about was how in July, Treasury and HUD got together and figured out how to release new guidance that made it much more possible and practical to layer ARPA in with tax credits and other traditional sources for affordable housing. And one of those was they said, oh, you know that stuff about how we said you couldn't use loans unless they were all paid off in by 2026. They said the reason Treasury had such restrictions is Treasury does not have a system for monitoring things like housing projects over 20 or 30 or 40 or whatever years. And so by working with HUD and other providers that are already providing the monitoring to ensure that those properties are retained as affordable, that's one of the reasons they said, hey, oh good, existing organizations will be doing the heavy lifting. And so they have said well, there are a number of enumerated housing programs. The low-income housing tax credit program is one of them. Home investment partnerships is another. I think there are about 11, but there is no longer that weird prohibition on using long-term loans. And so this would allow us to use ARPA for a very important goal that many people in our community stated, and also not be pushing the regulations of ARPA. So those are the changes that have made this a possible consideration. And obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but there will be a discussion of uses of ARPA, the remaining ARPA at the city council meeting on this coming Monday. So this is why we were asking the committee to consider the funding request, but not lock into sources by using ARPA for part of the housing cost. ARPA would not be used, was not recommended for the commercial, the retail commercial or the parking. It would be basically layering ARPA with Affordable Housing Fund on the actual housing unit. So I just wanted to clarify why this is sort of coming out of the blue, where it may seem like it's coming out of the blue.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks, Sarah. Councilmember Reed, do you have comments?
Yes, and I'll turn my camera on
Thank-
at the request. Sorry, I'm double tasking now at Jewel, but so I am just for staff, if Paul or Sarah can give a bit of background. So there are city-owned properties involved in this, correct? In this deal, and what did we pay for those city-owned properties? Do we have the price tag? And my apologies if that happens to be in the memo. I didn't see it.
No, we got the properties, the main property. I honestly don't remember what the city paid for the 2 lots on the north end. It was not a great deal of money because they were paid for during the Great Recession following the mortgage meltdown. But we paid only a relatively small amount of legal fees to get the primary lot, which is the corner lot, because that was negotiated as a fee in lieu of foreclosure. And we didn't get it through the no cash bid process, but we got it through the Cook County no cash bid process. We just negotiated a fee in lieu instead of going through that whole process. So the cost was negligible to the city.
So we're thinking a few $100,000, under 500,000.
Oh, it was way under that. I mean, it was probably
Honestly,
the amount of legal fees was probably under $20,000, probably
Right.
under 10.
I think exactly. I think there was some discussion at first. The acquisition at first was in the range of 300, Councilmember Reed. And then we
$300?
300,000.
Oh, 300. Okay. I thought
We worked with the law department to negotiate kind of a different arrangement because of its this thing was just complete an environmental mess in addition to the liens and other challenges. So Sarah's right. It was some really kind of administrative amount of money to acquire it.
Well, it was
Okay.
partly through the no cash bid program. I mean, that's what got us in the discussion. And then we negotiated with the owner.
Yeah, what I'm let me first state this. I'm quite supportive of this. I think the need for affordable housing is clear. I just, for my 3 colleagues, particularly 2 colleagues who are on the council, what I wanted to lay out is, and we're talking about, so all in the city, if we were to grant the full amount that's being requested here, which is $4.5 million. Marion, where you can hop in.
4 million?
4 million, I'm sorry, 4. I don't know where I added the 0.5. Okay, so $4 million being requested here. The city is just about $4 million in on this project. And there will be 40 units of housing. Am I getting this correct?
44 units
44 units of housing.
plus
And is there-
retail.
Okay, and there is retail included in this as well.
Mhm.
How many units of retail?
There is 3,500 square foot of retail.
Okay. Okay, yeah,
Roughly.
roughly, yeah. I just wanted to just have those numbers crystal clear in folks' heads. 40 units, 3,500 square feet of retail, $4 million in. I just want to keep that clear as I bring some other.
And 100%
forward.
affordable housing. I just need to say that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. No opposition here, but just wanted to highlight those numbers. I think it's a really good deal. Fully supportive. Just want to highlight that.
And it's 44 units, they said. Lots of fours. 44
Yeah, 44
units
units.
for the $4
Yeah.
million.
Right. Okay, Joanne, you have a question or comment?
I had a question, it says we're gonna take $3 million out of the TIF and there's 2 million in there. So the TIF keeps accruing some money every year, then that there would be the $3 million there for them to receive. And then I assume on the Affordable Housing Fund, that amount goes up on a continual basis. Do we have an estimate of how much might be added this year to the Affordable Housing Fund?
Well, we'll let
mhm.
Paul talk about the TIF part.
So I can estimate that last collection that should have occurred in December, that's been delayed. There will be a collection of approximately 1.5 million. And we have a cash balance of 2.4. And then again, we've got, again, if you assume that the collection is the same as last year, we'll have another 1.5 coming in. I hope it's higher than that. So yes, that's how that works.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that more money is gonna keep coming in every year of the TIF.
Right.
Then,
And
and
then,
the-
and then Sarah can talk about the Affordable Housing Fund. That's very unpredictable, I think.
Yes. Well, the one thing I can predict is we will get $125,000 from the Mather, which we do every year. That is our most certain funding for the Affordable Housing Fund. We have not gotten any fees in lieu of units on site since the 1555 Ridge project. We've been successful in getting more units on site, but 1555 Ridge actually did 5% of their 10% requirement with units on site, and they paid us a fee in lieu for the remainder of $575,000. And we do get some demolition taxes, but that is rarely above $50,000 a year. So one of the things that we are going to be bringing are, as part of the IHO update, is some ways of potentially getting more money for the Affordable Housing Fund. But right now, it does not replenish very rapidly, and we are retaining a balance of approximately $1 million in that fund because it funds a number of other things, including MTO and SEPA for the maintenance of the IHO list, as well as staffing and some other costs that are for things like we do the legal fees that for when we're getting properties through things like the no cash bid, those that are likely housing location, those fees are paid out of the Affordable Housing Fund. But that is, probably under $10,000 a year. So that's not a ton of money, but it isn't replenishing right now very rapidly. So we've got to work on that.
Right, yeah. And we'll be having that discussion about the IHO, right after the first, we are after the first of the year, aren't we? Coming soon.
Yes.
Yes.
It's a topic for next, the February committee, an initial topic, but it'll come back. Yeah, this is a big topic for this spring.
Right, yeah, okay. Kathy, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Ravel. I just wanted to say that I understand this will deplete the inclusionary housing fund, but to get 44 units of affordable housing and some very deeply affordable housing at 30% of AMI. And if I'm not mistaken, it is supported housing or supportive housing for special needs population. If I'm wrong on that, let me know, Richard.
It's just 20 minimum of 20% would be reserved as supportive housing.
Yeah, I mean,
So some set aside.
this is the kind of project that I think personally, I envision for that fund. So I'm very supportive of trying to replenish it and finding ways to increase it. But I think to get this kind of affordability, this personally to me is a good use for those funds. Thanks.
No, and that's a good point, that it meets a lot of different needs, not just affordability. Yeah, Ugo, you have another question or comment?
I do. Both. I have a comment and I have a question. The comment is that your numbers are adding up to 43 on page 9 of 21 on the report. I'm sure that's just a typo of sorts. So my question is in regards to Evanston residents' priority for the occupancy of these residences. I happened to be walking my dog last week and I run into a resident of another project in Evanston that during the conversation, I learned that it was someone who was living in Schaumburg, not in Evanston. So it kind of took me by surprise. And I go, well, welcome to our community, of course. And I was really glad that somebody that could get the benefit of that beautiful affordable housing on Howard Street, the Anne Rainey apartments. But it made me think that, Evanston is brunting the cost, brunting all the implications that have to have the residents in our community, welcome them to our community, and make sure that they're taken care at the level that we would like to have them taken care of. So I also would like to hear that there is an assurance that they will be Evanston residents' first choice, if at all possible, and when possible.
Yeah. Richard, do you want to talk about how that works?
Yes. So that is something that we have specifically requested for this project, would be to have a preference for Evanston residents over others. Current federal fair housing laws do not allow those types of preferences. As you can imagine, there are some communities where that would be very exclusionary. So federal fair housing laws currently specifically prohibit that. We have specifically asked if we would be allowed, based on Evanston's particular circumstances, if we could actually use that preference for Evanston residents here in this project. We don't know what the results of that request are, but we have explicitly asked for it.
Okay.
I do want to make a note that even when we have not been able to restrict it that way, we have successfully gotten significant numbers of Evanston residents into new housing, both the Anne Rainey Apartments and in Emerson Square when it was originally rented up. By what we do is we keep an interested parties list. And it's people who contact us about, wow, I'm interested in that new development you're talking about. And then we, the city, have turned that over to the developers when they start opening up their list for people to apply. So they have a pretty substantial list. I'm out of the office, and so I apologize because I don't have my camera on, and I also can't always access all my files. But we really did have a pretty substantial list for each of those properties, and we did not get everybody to be Evanston residents, but we got a significant number. I also want to point out that one of the things we sometimes do is we find out, even when we have a local preference, it doesn't always take care of everything we wish we had thought of or our residents. We were allowed by HUD to have a preference for Evanston residents in the scattered site acquisition and rehab of our neighborhood stabilization program. And we set that preference for people who lived in Evanston, worked in Evanston, or had, there was some family relationship. I forget exactly how it was worded. So in other words, if they had some family history in some way, shape, or form. But one of the things that we didn't cover well and that we couldn't do is that was a time when, as many of you know, a number of people were really displaced from their housing. They lost their housing, moved out of Evanston, and wanted to move back. And we didn't have any preference to help people who had been pushed out to be able to move back into that housing. So one of the challenges is your preferences never actually work quite the way you expect them to, but there are ways to get significant numbers of Evanston residents to be housed in the new buildings that we build.
Yeah, great.
Good to hear.
All
Well,
right.
improve that intersection, I think.
Mhm.
And bring more
Right.
people, you know, for whatever
Mhm.
business go in there too.
Yeah, right, yeah. Well, it seems as though everybody's sounding very positive about this project. So I think we're maybe ready for a vote. So the motion was to recommend approval of $4 million as gap funding, and it's a little unspecified there, for the HODC mixed-use project at 1805, 1815 Church Street. So could we have a roll call on that, please?
Do we need a motion?
Oops, whoops.
Yeah, we need a motion. I would like to add to the discussion if I may. I have a quick question for Director Flack.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know if you want to make the motion first. We can make the motion first if you
Well, we
prefer.
had-
Motion's
we
been
had-
made.
We had the motion. I was
Oh,
calling.
the motion's already been made, okay. We're not being specific as to which fund, and this is, I'm getting ready, my 20-month-old is dealing with a bit of an injury, so I can't get on video. I'm getting ready to go to the hospital, but I will say, I'll make sure I get on the video next time, and this is Councilmember Burns, just for the record, for the media, and just for the record, speaking now. Do we, in the motion, have we identified source of funds yet, or we're just saying that we are moving forward with funding it, but we haven't determined the specific sources of funding just yet, right?
What we've done is we put in initially two sources. One would be $1 million out of the Affordable Housing Fund for the housing portion. The other $1.5 million for the housing portion of the development could come from the West Evanston TIF, and the $1.5 million that is for the commercial space and the parking would have to come from the TIF. What we have said could be a consideration is using ARPA for the $1.5 million, the other $1.5 million for the housing portion. But that is something that obviously staff isn't trying to make a hard recommendation on at this point, because that's on the council's agenda for discussion, how to use the remaining funds on Monday. But it is a very, very eligible use, since Treasury worked with HUD and figured out how to more effectively use the ARPA funding for affordable housing by layering it in with other approved programs like tax credits that the long-term compliance and assurance that the money stays in the affordable housing fund, in the affordable housing use, is taken care of by HUD or other agencies. That was one of the big reasons Treasury originally did not have any traditional loans as a way of funding housing. Long-term loans is commonly how affordable housing is funded. So that just gives us some options. We're not saying that.
Just so we know what we're voting on, can you just state the funding? Can you just state the funding?
Okay.
Just so we all know what this
Yes.
motion is
We are
about.
absolutely recommending $1 million from the Affordable Housing Fund. We're absolutely recommending $1.5 million from TIF for the commercial portion and the parking. The remaining $1.5 million, we see one of two sources. One is TIF, but that would really strain the TIF of money for other things. And the other is ARPA, because we have a little over $5 million of ARPA that is unallocated at this time.
Great. So envision that that's part of the motion. And then I think now, Anna, can we have the roll call?
Yes. Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Joanne Salome,
Aye.
was that aye?
Yes.
Okay. Lauren Berlin,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
My apologies. Aye.
Councilmember Heracariz,
Aye.
Kathy Feingold,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
and Monica Bobo.
Monica has
Oh.
removed herself even from the discussion and being on because she works for the Illinois Housing Development Authority, so it is considered a conflict of interest for her.
Okay.
All right.
So
So
she will come
motion
back when we have finished.
Okay, right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Motion passes.
Great. Thanks very much, everybody. And thanks for being with us, Richard and Paul. Thank you for joining us as well. And
Thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much. Really appreciate it.
uh-huh.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yep. So now before we get to our second item, which is the small medium landlord assistance program, we Carla Sutton had some public comment for us.
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
First, I'm appalled by the current vote that you just did, knowing that the majority of residents in my community do not want this development. You have not done a traffic study. You have not done any kinds of studies of the people who will be adversely affected by this development. I'm ashamed of every one of you that voted for this today. You have as a slap to the face to the members of Fifth Ward who live within 1,000 feet of this monstrosity that you have approved for funding. Secondly, the other thing I want to say is that it has not been approved. It's still up to be discussed in February. How dare you approve something that has not even been approved by the city? I'm just very, very upset at this discussion that you are having today. And secondly, as far as the small landlords, I wish there was some way that you could have some kinds of applications that would benefit us who have had a severe loss through COVID-19. We could not collect our losses, and it will take me 2 or 3 years to recover the lost income at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so to approach our next topic, I propose that we have 2 motions. The first motion would be that we discuss the maximum number of rental units that we want to consider to be eligible for the small and medium landlord program. And then once we have that discussion, then we could have a motion for the actual number that we seem to be agreeing on. So if I could have a motion to get us started with the discussion.
Yeah, I will move that we discuss the maximum number of units for a property owner to qualify for the small property owner funds. I hate the word landlord.
Right, thank you. And
Second.
okay, great. So staff, did you want to share anything with us? I mean, I know we had information in our packet.
Yes, so the information is all in your packets, and I'll just give a brief update as to the new research that we've done. So as you remember, back in November, the Small Landlord Task Force presented some data to the committee, and our findings highlighted that the very, very small landlords, were commonly known as mom and pop landlords, were landlords that owned 1 to 4 units. And then small landlords owned 10 to 25. And then the medium landlords were the ones that owned 25 to 50. So we decided, or the task force decided, that 35 kind of was like the happy medium, based on the national and local trends that we found. And fast forward to that request, to that meeting in November, the committee asked us to narrow down the data analysis to specific census tracts where naturally occurring affordable housing would be present, which were 8092, 8102, and 8103.01. So once we analyzed the data, it came back that the vast majority, as you can see probably in your chart, and I can even pull it up if you'd like me to. The vast majority of the landlords were mom and pop landlords. So they were that 1 to 5 units owned. So that's the individual landlords. And then the other landlord types were either LLPs, LLCs, LPs, corporations, or 501c3s or nonprofits, which owned those units, with the total landlords being mom and pop of being 565. And then we broke them down up to 35 plus. And as you can see, the vast majority are mom and pop. And then small and medium landlords are in this threshold right here. So with that being said, we analyzed that data and we realized that the larger the landlords, the more units that they had. And that was in par with the national trends. So we analyzed the census data, which had an update from 2018, which was presented in November. And then they updated it to the 2021 census data. So the larger landlords had the ability to offset the COVID-19 costs much better than the smaller landlords, just because of the income that was coming in from their larger amount of units, rather than the smaller landlords who did not have access to funds once people were not coming back or were not able to pay their rents. So we, the task force, believed that 35 was the right number, just because, as you can see, from 26 to 35 plus, it's a negligible number in comparison to the 565 mom and pop landlords. So we wanted to spread the aid to different types of landlords, and we specifically decided to call the program Small and Medium Landlord Assistance Program, just to make sure that we were able to aid as many different types and makeups of landlords in the city of Evanston. So with that, I can take any questions, or if you'd like to start discussions.
Yeah, Ugo, go ahead first.
Sorry to be the first one all the time, but a couple of points on this one, and it is that I was not necessarily agreeing with what the task force presented to the committee in November, and I believe that I was not present at that meeting, but I have always been under the impression and of the opinion that smaller landlords suffer a greater loss every time one of the units fails to pay the rent, compared to somebody who owns 30 units to someone who owns 2 units. If I miss my other unit payment, if I'm a owner occupant of a building of a 2-flat, I lost 50% of the rental income of that building, of my units. But if I lost 1 out of 30, I lost 3% of my rental income. If I lost 3 of the units income, I lost less than 10% of my rental income. So I do have a real biased position on this very small landlords. And if there is enough money to go after we compensate those landlords that really had the greater loss, then so be it. Happy for everybody then that the medium landlords get some of the money. That's absolutely great. But I don't think so, especially given the overwhelming numbers of mom and pop, as we're calling them, operations that we have in the city of Evanston. So I truly believe that having the very small landlords benefit from this resource that the city is offering and putting to their benefit to compensate for their loss. I think that we're serving a more needed community or part of our community. So that's what that's my comment.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, I guess just a few questions first. So one, it sounds like the recommendation then out of the committee or working group was 30. I heard either 30 or 35.
Yeah, 35.
And if that's the case, then I'm wondering how it got to 20, because
that was
there's really nothing. I guess there's no great conflict if it was meant to be 30 or 35
right
from the beginning, because I agree with that. I think it should, remain at 30 or 35. I've said during all of our calls that I think that first instinct or some of that initial research that led us to say 30 or 35 was the right one. And we should have, I would have supported just continuing to cap it at 30 or 35 units. So I guess that's the first question, just trying to get clarification on how it dropped below 30 or 35.
Yeah, I suppose we could all go back and listen to our committee discussion in November, but somehow we reduced it. So yeah, Councilmember Reed, do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, in part, our working group was actually going to suggest lower than that based on, and Anna, you'd be the person who knows this best, but based on previous programs and standards, which, typically a small landlord, I think from our early research, from Anna's early research and Marion's early research, a small landlord is typically much smaller than 30 units. And so I think, I almost think that the question is in the inverse, how did we get so high?
So I'm happy to take that question. I think the important part is to remember, like, we've shortened sometimes by calling this the small landlord, but the original intention was to consider both small and medium landlord. So while I would agree that small landlords skew much smaller than 35, depending on the understanding of when we refer to small landlord, are we really talking about mom and pop, or are we talking about really typically small landlords? And those are two different numbers. What did happen is that the suggestion was made for 35, and it did get lower during HCDC committee conversation based on some members of the committee wanting to skew smaller. I will say that one thing to really understand is that we're working with local data that's really rough, first of all. And even on all the trends, most of the data that's kept about properties and about landlords is building-based, it's property-based, and it's built environment-based. So we can get a whole bunch of data about number of units in a building or any kind of ownership about a specific building or property or anything like that. But when it comes to landlord size, it gets a little tricky. One of the reasons why we suggested including some of the medium landlords in this program as well is because they're still the same threshold of $15,000. Yes, there could be a bigger impact on some of the small landlord, but even in our survey, despite the fact that there was a very small number, in our local survey, we didn't see at all what we expected to see. There were people that had more units that were showing a higher impact, and there were people that had very small number of units that had an impact, but that was very small or no impact at all. So our local data wasn't necessarily showing that owning just one unit or two units or just a few was a clear correlation to having a big loss or a more impactful loss. I do not disagree with Hugo that, of course, if you only have one unit and somebody didn't pay for a year or something like that, that would be a much bigger impact. But there was also some notion of potentially the fact that in our survey, we included the mention of having received rental assistance, and some of the people that responded had received rental assistance to cover some of those loss. When we're looking at the buildings in the census tracts, we're looking at smaller buildings. We don't have a ton of very, very large rental buildings in those areas, and that could potentially mean that our medium landlords are dealing with a lot of smaller buildings, which means that during COVID, their cost most likely multiplied. So I think those points are important to consider.
Great, thank you. And Councilmember Burns, you said you had several questions.
Yeah, I think the next question is just, is there, so one clarifying question too is, but the official recommendation out of that working group, I don't know if there was a vote or just consensus was built, was 35. I want to confirm that
Yes.
was the recommendation.
The initial consensus from the task force was 30 to 35.
Okay, thank you. And then second, is there any type of needs or means test in this program, the way it's currently written, whether you have 1 to 4 units or 24 or whatever that cutoff is?
No, we looked at a lot of those different options, both within the task force and in our previous conversation with the committee. And there's a lot of complexities that make this extremely difficult to implement. So what the committee settled in previous conversation was census tracts.
I don't want to make you go through it again. Please continue. I just don't want, because I remember the discussion. I just didn't know where we ended up.
Sure. So we ended up with focusing on the census tract that we're looking at right now, which are showing a very high impact for COVID-19, are showing a higher level of affordable housing. And so that was kind of why we ended up with that process, because it's very difficult. There is also the fact that to be eligible at all for the program, the landlord has to show a loss of income. So the $15,000 threshold is an up to amount, but it's 75% of the actual loss of income.
And that's,
so it's not
that's what I meant by a needs test. I said needs and means test, and what I meant by needs test is exactly that. So we are having the applicants demonstrate in some way that they experience a loss.
Absolutely.
Okay,
And we're covering up to 75% of it, of the difference between 2019 and 2021 based on tax returns.
And and I brought that up. Oh, please go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to just highlight that there are contingencies for those medium landlords to make sure that we are distributing the funding equally or equitably to those medium landlords and to the small and very small landlords. So that's why the funding cap is there, and that's why we're requiring them to document their losses.
And so the reason why I asked that question is because even to Hugo's concern, even if there are property owners with 24 to 35 units, wherever we end up, because it seems like there's still a needs test, right? They still have to demonstrate loss. I don't think we're going to have property owners that in some way are getting over on the city, right? That are applying for money that they don't really need. And so I think we've addressed that by the needs assessment. Also, it sounds like from the research that we did that in those kind of qualifying census tracts that we, determined that there were more property owners with 1 to 4 units, and obviously that there were less property owners with between whatever I don't know what the threshold was, 20 to 30 or whatever it is. I think we determined that it was more, but again, we didn't determine the need between the two, and that's been my concern the whole time. That to me, that just says yes, there's more of this kind of landlord, but it doesn't say that the need is greater, among these landlords and other landlords. And I think anecdotally, what not only we've heard on this call from the speakers, landlords that have come to speak, but also just anecdotally what I've heard in the community from having different discussions with landlords is that I do think the need has and the difficulty that COVID created has been shared across all levels of property ownership and units, especially in the areas that we're talking about between that, the really small mom and pop to 25 to 30. So that's all. I would support this going back to that original recommendation of 30 or 35 units.
And going off of what you just said, Councilmember Burns, it's important to use qualitative data whenever we have limitations on the quantitative, which is what we experienced during our research. So it's important to have a holistic view of the situation. So that's my comment.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, and Councilmember Reed, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, no, I most of what I was going to say got said. I just want to also back up Ugo's assessment there. And sorry, I'm now riding a bike, so I can't put my camera on. But I wanted to back up Ugo's comments earlier, and then I don't want to get off topic here, but separate. I'll just mention this quickly. Is I would love for us to maybe separately make a motion to name this the residential rental providers, assistance or whatever, instead of, I think we should move away from the very antiquated term landlord. And so if we can maybe start that with this, I'd be appreciative.
Okay. Let's go to Lauren next.
Yeah, hi. So I wanted to make 2 points. So one is Ugo, who I agree with you on so many things. On this one, I'm going to say that I understand your point, that if you have 2 units and one isn't rented for some period of time, that's a huge loss. But I will also say that the flip can be true, which is that if you have 1 or 2 units, that might not be the entirety of your income. And I think that someone who has slightly larger number of units, 25 to 35 units, we do know that that is probably their income. And we don't know what that looks like. That's not necessary. So I just want to say, I think we should be careful on both sides about making assumptions about what the unit count says about the property owner's need for the income. I think, another point I want to make is, and just in case, I think we should also be careful as a group, it may be that someone owns, well, that doesn't matter. The other point I'll say is, we were all very enthused. So I do very much support raising the limit. I think all of you know that. And I think we were very eager to support this previous project we just discussed, which would be 44 units. And we were talking about the need for exactly this type of housing, which is affordable rental housing. And so I think that if we want to be consistent with that, I just don't think that someone who has 35 units, whether that's 1 building with 35 units or 6 buildings with 6 units or 10 buildings with 3.5, whatever it is to get us there, we don't know. But that person is also providing a service. And if they can demonstrate that they have lost money, I think that we are equally indebted to them making sure that we have affordable rental housing as we are to a smaller residential owner or whatever it is that Councilmember Reed is using. I'm with you in spirit on this, Councilmember Reed. I just can't remember the terminology. So, and I think calling it small and medium is important. Maybe if we want to use that to signify that this is not just micro or small landlords.
Okay, great, thanks. Ugo, you go ahead.
Thank you very much. Couple of comments on that, and it is that thank you, Lauren, for that, and I also appreciate your perspective on it. But I would like to say on your comment that income, it is critical because of the census tracts we're talking about. So we don't have a segment of the population of Evanston that has large incomes. So for somebody who has 2 units and they're renting at $1,000, let's just make that across the board. So math will make our life a lot easier if we utilize it, especially in this context. If somebody loses $1,000 of income because they own 2 units, they lost $1,000 of income in a household that doesn't have a lot of it. So somebody who owns 27 units is collecting $27,000 of income for those 27 units and loses 1,000, 2,000, or 3,000. The impact of that loss, it's much benign.
But the person with
Regardless
27
of-
units would have 27 times the debt service as the one unit. So we can't look at a pure, we're not talking about net profit here. We're talking about revenue, right? So it's, I mean, I don't think you.
There's strengthening numbers also, Lauren, in that sense that somebody who has $27,000 has a lot more free income from that income. But if we go to also math on the number of units that are owned by owners who have 1 to 4 units in their portfolio, it's 540. And I think Anna or Miriam mentioned that this is pretty rough data, what we are presented here with. So let's give a margin of 10% of error to that. So we're talking about 53 units less. So we're now at 489 units for one unit. And because I'm deducting that, so 10% of 5 will be half a unit. So we're at 4.5 on the medium. So let's do the proportionate, and let's give the proportionate amount to the 500 or 480 or 540, whatever units we decide to, but do it mathematically, and we will give the bulk of the funds that we have in proportion to the owners of the 1 to 4 units. So if we see it as that, and math is very simple, then we have to give it to the majority of owners, which are very small owners. And if there are no claimers to that money, then let's move up. Let's move up to more units and more units and more units, whatever money we have left. But I think that that will be more of a social justice, if you will, also along with aid for the loss of income due to COVID. So that is my comment. Thank you so much for your patience with me.
Kathy, we haven't heard from you on this issue.
Well, I appreciate the nuances that people are sort of bringing out of this. And as someone who underwrites loans for residential housing on a daily basis, $27,000 in income, however many units that relates to, there isn't usually a real big profit margin there. The expenses to maintain and operate those units is a big chunk of that income. So you can really, I mean, I think Lauren has a good point in saying that it's possible that somebody who owns a 4-unit building, that is their entire income. It's possible. But it's also possible that somebody who owns a 2-flat may have a day job. So there's so many nuances to this. And even though there's more, that's just our housing stock. I think in some ways that we have a lot of smaller buildings in Evanston. And not everybody can be can own 25 units. Because again, that's a full-time job. That's probably their primary source of income. So the nuances are all over the place, and I know we're all talking about them, but I really advise against having a reduction or a preference for smaller landlords, because it really, as Councilmember Burns said and others have said, it's a needs test. Somebody who has all their income in residential property ownership, they're gonna take that loss just as hard as somebody who only owns a 2-unit building. I'm done.
Right, okay. Back to Councilmember Burns.
No, I'll be brief on this. I just wanted to say that I've talked to a lot of landlords, and I think that there are a lot of business models that really only work once property is sold, and the income that they get after everything is accounted for, really just goes towards maintaining the property with very little profit. Especially, again, the category that we're looking at, which are property owners who are providing naturally occurring affordable housing, which means in many cases they're pricing the units affordably. So they're taking a loss there as well. And from what I recall, all of this started from, especially if we go back towards even what we heard from some of the property speakers who own property, is that this is also a way to incentivize those landlords to continue to provide affordable housing in the community, as opposed to selling out to developers who can and likely will increase the rents. And so it does require a certain commitment to price housing affordably, especially in Evanston, because you don't have to. Like, you could have some really subpar housing in Evanston and charge much more than what I'm seeing some landlords charge. And I'm not saying that's a great thing, but it's the reality that you can come in, raise the rents pretty much in every new unit that you purchase if it was priced below market value and or market price, and you can increase the rents. I see it all the time. There was a property on Jackson not too long ago where the owners came in and immediately increased the rents by $300, and they were still under like what they could get for it. That's not even all they can raise it for and still attract tenants. So I think this is the right thing to do. And that's all. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Councilmember Reed.
Yes, I just want to note that I think we should make sure that there is a requirement that folks are actually providing affordable, or is that, I don't believe that's included in the current
No, that was discussed quite a lot because there was a desire to try to find a way to include that. It creates a lot of complexity because it requires getting all the leases and checking them and making sure that we have the size of the units and deciding what is an affordable rent for those areas. So that's the reason why we chose the census tract we're choosing, because they are the most affordable, they have the most naturally affordable housing in the area, amongst the fact, outside of the fact that they've also, on top of that, are the one that are the most impacted by a lot of factors, including COVID, which does make sense, but yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure of that, because I do want to highlight that just the existence of residential property providers or landlords necessarily increases the cost of housing, and necessarily those folks, their profit may not be their, month to month profit may not be wonderful, but essentially they're getting an asset that other people are paying for that they get to cash out on, in 15, 20, 30 years. And they have, $1 million plus property at the end of it that's been paid for by other people, and they get to enjoy that. And so I just want to, make sure that we're, really honing in on those folks who are not these huge landlords who are essentially driving up the cost of housing. In almost every case, just by the nature of what it means to be a landlord. So that's it.
Okay. So I'm hoping we can wrap this up. Ugo, you have another quick comment?
My apologies. I forgot to lower my hand. No comments. No more comments.
Okay, then Councilmember Reed, could I call on you to make a motion, because you can use the new language that you want us to use besides landlord.
Yes, I move that we increase the threshold for the residential rental provider for the small and medium residential rental provider funds, that we increase the threshold to 35 units for the maximum number of units to qualify.
Okay.
That was not a clear motion, but I think everything was captured there.
Right, we understand. Okay, is there a second for the motion?
Second.
Okay, and then Anna, can you call the roll, please?
Sure. Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Joanne Salome,
Aye.
Lauren Berlin,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
For the benefit of community, aye.
You don't.
You don't have.
Councilmember Hirakaris,
Aye.
Kathy Feingold,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
Monica Bobo.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Great. Okay, thank you, everybody, for the robust discussion. Okay, now I think we're having a couple of staff updates for us. One on the landlord tenant ordinance overview.
Yes. So I just wanted to mention that this is going to be just a quick kind of catch up on what has happened in previous episodes, we'll say. The meat of this is meant to give you a little bit of context so that when we come back in future meetings, you understand what has happened in the past and we can have some conversation. We will absolutely be involving local community organization in preparation for future conversation, and that would include Metropolitan Tenant Organization, Open Community, which I know Dominic is on the call in the audience right now, as well as LCBH, amongst other, as part of the conversation around this update. And Anna, you can go to the next slide. So essentially what has happened in the past is that in April 2021, staff was working with the Housing and Homelessness Commission around a potential update of the City of Evanston Residential Landlord Tenant Ordinance. That ordinance was last updated in 2016, and part of what prompted this conversation was the need to take into account some changes that have been going on in the county and in other municipalities, and things we wanted to review and look at to make sure that the City of Evanston Landlord Tenant Ordinance was including everything we wanted it to. So what we're going to be considering, amongst other things, is going to be the Cook County Landlord Tenant Ordinance that was effective in June 2021. And LCPH has had a role within the update of this ordinance, and it had provided to us and presented to the Housing and Homelessness Commission back in 2021, kind of the difference between where Evanston was and where Cook County's ordinance was going to. The other part that we would like to also include in this conversation is the Just Housing Amendment to the Cook County Human Rights Ordinance. That was effective in January 2020. And then we also have, as other document included in this conversation, is the potential update of the Evanston model lease, as well as the lease addendum in conjunction with any updates we make with any other ordinances. The City of Evanston Nuisance Premises Ordinance, as well as the Fair Housing Ordinance that was recently updated. So next slide.
Can I
Yep.
jump in there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I do want to flag as the council member who made the referral regarding just cause eviction, and some of that was highlighted recently in the media with there's an Evanston Now blog story about some folks who feel forced out of their housing because of increased rent. Now, just cause may not fully have covered this incident, but I just want to make sure that's not falling off of the radar. Because
It's not. It's part of the next slide.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I just saw the legislation, and that's why I want to stop there. All right. Thank you.
Okay. So the suggestion that were initially brought to HHC, so the Housing and Homelessness Commission in 2021, are there's a summary here on your screen, but essentially it included the provision of excessive move-in fee, kind of limits on late fees, and looking at how security deposits are taken and how they're kept, interest on them, whether there's new practices that kind of rename them in place of security deposit to kind of go around any kind of legislation, addressing foreclosure and utility disclosure. There was conversation around a one-time right to pay and stay allowing a tenant to be able to potentially avoid eviction and stay in their unit. And then there was conversation around increasing notice of for lease renewals, having different type of notice depending on the length of tenancy, so that somebody that's been in the unit for more than 3 years, as an example, might get a little bit longer notice. And then we discussed as well the need to have plain language summary attached to a lease. Currently, we're requiring to attach the ordinance to a lease. And what's happening is the ordinance is very hard to understand for any normal person. It's very verbose and a lot of legalese. So trying to make this information very easy to access and very clear would probably help in the success of any of those changes. And then, of course, updating the model lease and addendum and any kind of documentation that's supporting all those changes to make sure that we're completely aligned throughout all our different ordinances and it's clear and easy to understand for everybody, landlord and tenants, and including the just housing amendment protections. So there was quite a lot of items that could be reviewed as part of this conversation. This is not necessarily a quick one meeting conversation. It requires some discussion to make sure that we're really including everything that we would want to. But back then, this is the key points that were brought as suggestion to review for any kind of updates to the ordinance. On the next slide, since then, we've had several referrals, and there's additional things to consider that would be part of the conversation. And Anna, if you can. Okay. So one of the things that is important to consider is, of course, balancing the needs of landlords with the needs of the tenants, but also a few other things that have been topic of conversation since 2021 that should also be considered. One is the referral from Councilmember Reed around just cause eviction and limiting no fault evictions. There's a lot of conversation that we can have on this topic. And then there's two referrals from Councilmember Herrick Harris around, one is around fair notice and kind of the timing and notification for rent increases to provide advance notice for renters about their amount of increases. And then the other one is reviewing the required timing of security deposit returns and making sure that the limits there are fair and that they're provided back to renters in a timely manner. So that's a lot of conversation that we will be having. And part of the reason why we decided to just kickstart with this little snapshot is to give you some time to kind of get familiar with the topic. We obviously will be coming back with a lot meatier information and kind of comparison between different ordinances and suggestions, and we'll be having other experts from local organization to make sure that we can provide input to the conversation. And I see Sarah has her hand raised as well.
Right.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that one of the things that we really want to make sure of is that we get all of these, there's so many different things, but to get really a comprehensive update to our landlord tenant ordinance, because one of the really not good things would be if we made a lot of successive changes to the same ordinance. It would be frustrating for our landlords. It would make it do a good job of trying to train people and educate them about the changes, and it would be confusing for tenants too. So it's a big project, but I think it's important to do it in a comprehensive manner.
And will we share these the set of issues on these slides with the committee, so everybody has sort of the beginning working list that they can refer to in case?
Oh, sure.
Yes,
we can send this out. Mm-hmm.
I was actually planning on potentially sending some of the more detailed documents that drove those slides. It was too detailed for today and for this kind of first conversation, but yes, that's the plan, is to provide that to the committee members.
Great. Okay. So starting at the top of my screen, Ugo, go ahead.
Thank you again for the indulgence to be first. Marion responded to one of my questions, which was going to be to have the documentation that they're talking about here, being the landlord tenant ordinance, the current model lease, which I still don't understand what is called a model lease. It feels like every time we give it to a tenant, we're giving them something that is just a model to follow instead of an actual lease. So perhaps one of the changes could be the name of it. My second question then is, what is the time frame for us to approve all these? Because it is a lot of information. It is a lot of information, not only from what we already have, but what we're going to be getting from other entities like the Cook County organizations about landlord and tenants, and as well as the Chicago landlord and tenant ordinance, which is one that we tend to mirror quite a bit. So I know that just housing is also a complicated theme to be tackling at this time. So it'll be good for us to get familiar with all that information before we are asked to give a vote on that, and also the time frame for that vote, so I can kind of
Pace yourself.
my reading.
Right. Yeah. So Marion, what is sort of the timeline in your thought?
So my hope is we can work on this in the 2 beginning quarters of the year. But I'm also very conscious that we have a couple other big projects like the IHO review.
Right.
So the ideal goal is the next 6 months. But I also want to be realistic as far as what we're asking from the committee and how long our meetings have been in the recent times. But that's a goal. So I would expect that we'd have a couple meetings at least with time for discussion. This isn't something that I would want to throw out for a single discussion and vote.
Right. And I think Ugo is pointing out that it would be for our education if we have multiple, maybe we don't get it all at once, we get
exactly
portions at a time.
And Anna, I think you can stop sharing.
Okay. So, and Councilmember Reed, you have some more questions?
Yeah, I just want to, I think that maybe Councilmember Hedekadis and I can get together. I think the Just Cause eviction ordinance captures a lot of, at least one of the two referrals that he made. And so maybe it can be wrapped in, all of it maybe can be wrapped into one ordinance and just viewed as a package. I really appreciate the idea of trying to move this all forward in a cohesive package to, make some clear rulings on what's new here in Evanston, so we're not constantly moving the ball and changing regulations. And so I think that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I just want to note that. And so maybe we can help condense that down to one ordinance. And I do think typically, while Just Cause eviction ordinances are, the no fault eviction ordinances are fairly new, I think there's some really good examples of ordinances that include all of that. And then lastly, well, that's it. Thank you.
To respond to that, actually, one thing that staff would find really helpful is if there's a desire to make a shared referral from the various council member on this committee, so that staff has clear direction that this is a project that we can work on and put time on. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, Juan, if you want to co-sponsor, and anybody else, council members want to hop on that co-sponsorship, happy to do that, and we can combine it into one package.
Okay, great. Okay. Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to, and maybe it's for this committee to determine, but get a better sense of a timeline as well. I know one of this, what was just, I think, suggested as a possibility is that we would move them separately, I think, or we would do one at a time, discuss one at each meeting. I guess I am trying to get a better sense of how we're going to prioritize these 3 or 4 different things. And if we are gonna, if there is gonna be a, if we are gonna discuss some before others, I would certainly support Just Cause, or anything else that kind of directly impacts, can slow down displacement in Evanston. And I know more about Just Cause than some of the other ones, but whenever appropriate, and if it's needed to start prioritizing these, and when we discuss them, I'd like to, weigh in early to say I think Just Cause should be at the top, but happy to hear arguments for others.
So, well, I guess my question is, so we would do a Just Cause ordinance completely separate from the landlord tenant ordinance, or would it somehow be part of the landlord tenant?
I guess that's what I'm trying to understand. Mary.
I think that the way we piece it out in our conversation doesn't necessarily need to mirror the way it's going to be enacted and how it's going to be organized in the ordinance. I think I would want to understand legal's perspective on this, but I would suggest that we combine specific topics together. So like everything around late fees and security deposit and certain things, and then everything around eviction prevention or things that, and I would prefer that we don't have 14 different ordinances that landlords and residents have to refer to really truly understand what their rights and duties are. So part of this, I'm hoping, can be that we can make this clear and understandable for everyone. And usually having multiplication of everything is not always very helpful, but we'll have to also make sure that that's in line with what legal would want to do.
Right.
I do also just want to raise the point that we do have, open communities, MTO, Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. These organizations are all very anxious to work with us on this too. And they have a lot of experience trying to pull it together in a reasonable way. And I think that what we can maybe do is sort of outline what seems to be, as Marion was just talking, maybe grouping certain types of things and then providing them to the committee in those groupings, so it's a little more it's a little easier to keep track of and comprehend. Right now, it just sort of seems like a whole bunch of stuff.
Great.
That is a little bit overwhelming, I think. So,
right. Okay.
But I think it will. Marion's right. I think we'll be working on this much of the, probably the first half of the year, at least, just because it really is it's a big, it's a lot of different things. And there is a possibility, because even, when we put the just housing is in the human, is in our fair housing ordinance. In Cook County, it's in their human rights ordinance. So some of these things can be put in different places. I think we just have to figure out what makes the most sense to, I don't think there's a absolute right or wrong. I think that it's the best thing that we can do is try to make it as easy for people to find all of it, because I think that's one of the biggest problems.
Right. Great. Okay. Lauren, go ahead.
So my brain may be the only one that thinks this way since I'm not a rental person, but I could see us just throwing this out there in terms of how we think about dealing with all this information. I could almost see it grouping it into 3 stages of sort of the tenant experience, which is sort of like everything that happens up to and including signing the lease. And we could sort of look at what are the current policies and then what are the things that are proposed as a change in that stage. Then once they're in, everything, all the policies related to being in, and then what's current, what changes, and then all the policies related to getting out, either by choice or through eviction. For me, that would be a very helpful way to organize it. And of course, there might be some subjects that overlap, like deposit, security deposit would show up at the beginning and also at the end. But in homeownership, we talk a lot about the life cycle of the homeowner, and homeownership is a life cycle. And so I'm imagining that a tenant has a similar life cycle. So that would help me to keep it very linear, just a thought.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Councilmember Harakaris, we haven't heard from you for a while.
Yeah, so I think it makes sense to kind of look at it. Like I said, I don't know the best way to group these. I think a lot of these, I think the fair notice and also the eviction piece if I remember correctly from my conversations with interim director Flax a couple months ago, I think those are included in the Chicago tenant renter agreement. So we might have a little bit of it might help to look at what they've done to kind of see how they got to their path. It is, but it does make sense, like conversation wise, to maybe group the similar subjects together so we can kind of land either on like, agreed like time frame, because it's but comparing what Chicago, where it's like how much notice, and if we want to be increase those numbers or decrease, it's all, we can really get in the weeds with the details, but I think it'd be nice to kind of have a example of what we're kind of shooting for, like if going forward.
Okay. Ugo, comment, you have your hand up?
I do. Thank you. I'm lowering it now so it doesn't stay up forever. My comment is that I really strongly recommend that we keep this as a one topic. Tenant and housing provider. I like the term that Councilmember Reed introduced instead of landlord, which I never got, and I go, who's my landlord? It felt like I was giving servitude to somebody else, but so I like housing provider, and but it should be maintained as one, just because it's a relationship that involves so many people, but it is containing to the lease and the relationship during tenancy and at the end of that tenancy, which are the 2 points of most friction before the lease starts, the drafting of the lease and all of that, and then at the end of the tenancy with all the frictions that come up with wear and tear and all of that. So or somebody who doesn't want to leave and the landlord wants to increase the rent incredibly, and all of that comes with that relationship, but it's one relationship. So I would like to suggest that we keep it as one. As a comment that Councilmember Reed made about trying to accelerate our analysis of just cause, because Evansonians are being displaced as we are talking about these issues. So maybe we can have some more concrete figures about what is it that we're talking. Is it 10 families that are being displaced, 100 families, 2 families? So we can have that into our context of what we're talking. So just those are my comments.
Okay. And Lauren, you have your hand up still? No?
Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Well, obviously, this is going to be a major conversation for us for multiple meetings, and we're going to get a lot of material from staff to read and get up to speed. So clear the decks. We have one last little item, just to have a little brief discussion, because it's close to 9. Yeah, we have it's 10 to 9. So landlord, this is an update on the CDBG housing rehab loan forgiveness concept.
Right. So we wanted to provide an update because that's a topic that we've discussed for the last several months, and we were hoping to have more favorable news. But at this time, there's a few things that have been uncovered that we wanted to share with the committee. So if you remember, in previous conversation, we talked about potentially moving our CDBG housing rehab loans that are currently working as a 0% interest deferred loan to forgivable. And one of the key points to be able to do that is finding a source of funding that would replace the fund that are coming in once the deferred loan are being repaid, that are currently continuing to fund the program. The program is funded with those repayment as well as some entitlement fund from the CDBG program based on your allocations. So Our partner, SEPA, who is currently helping with construction management of the program and is also a recipient of IDA's funding for some housing rehab loans, had mentioned that they were potentially going to be able to apply for additional grants, new grants that IDA had been putting together. And that led us to maybe consider whether this could be an option to finally be able to put a pilot together that with this new source of funding, we could try for a year or two to see how forgivable loans were working and what kind of impact that could have. Unfortunately, while SEPA has been approved for the funding, the new funding from IDA, IDA's made some changes to their home value cap for the existing grants. So what that essentially means is that for the existing grant that SEPA has been having, we used to have a valuation, the maximum the property could be valued at was $330,000 in early 2022. They dropped it to 276. Meanwhile, properties in Evanston have been surging their valuation. So what that means is that most likely, just in the current state of the program, a lot of the housing rehab that we're going to be doing is going to be done through CDBG funding versus the current IDA funding that we have. Now that new grant is coming into play, and while it is possible that they would not be using the same value for the property, there's a very good chance that they will. We don't have this information yet, which is why we can't quite make a final recommendation on how to move forward. But there's a really good chance that this new money is also going to be associated with a max value of $276,000. So that is something that is unfortunate, and we do have some funding available currently, and we're going to continue to keep getting funds coming in from older loans that are coming back with repayment. But if we go to forgivable loans right now with the pilot, we do run a certain risk of depleting the funds a lot quicker with no identified sources of funding currently, no new source of funding.
Kathy, go ahead.
Do we know why IDA reduced it, considering
prices
have been increasing? And
I've been asking that question multiple ways to our partners at SEPA and in other ways. It is hard to understand, especially because in a lot of their other programs, they've raised caps to follow the market. So this is something we're going to continue to ask, but at this time, I have not gotten a clear answer.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I guess we'll wait to hear from you when you have more information, when we get more clarity about what IDA's going to do. And anyway, Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, I was gonna say, does this only affect the money that we were thinking we could use for a forgivable program, or does it affect some of the other programs we talked about that SEPA could provide Evanston residents, some of the newer ones that they were thinking they could provide Evanston residents?
So the new one in question is the one that they are not 100% sure yet what cap is going to be for that program, and we're waiting to hear on that. The existing programs, such as the HAP funds and the other one that used to be I believe it's SFR, but it's been renamed, so I'm blanking on the name. Those existing program, they're both affected by that cap. Yes,
Okay.
so that's, even if we weren't talking about forgivable loans, that would be a fairly significant change to our program altogether, as far as how the funding is going to be split and how our applications are going to be split between CDBG and IDA, IDA funds.
And the program, what percentage of the program is funded through, or that fund is funded through repayment of the no interest loans? Do you know?
So currently 100% of the CDBG funded projects are, oh, what percentage? Oh, okay. Well, it's hard to say because
It's about 50-50, I would say, was what we were expecting.
right. So were you asking if what percentage of the repayment, because the balance
I mean,
between the entitlement and the repayment, or
So
the balance between?
the current no interest, we have an existing CDBG no interest loan program, right?
Yes.
Right.
And so I'm saying, I guess historically, what percentage of that fund is comes from debt repayment versus any new funding that we get in from CDBG or anywhere else?
Okay.
Is it 100% supported by debt repayment, or I thought we get some annual funding in that also
Right.
goes to support that program, or is that not the case?
We
No,
do
we do.
annual.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, we historically, we have funded the actual loans. In other words, the projects have been funded out of the revolving loan fund. And we have averaged about $120,000 a year over the last 10 years, per year. Right now, our balance is about 275 because our program has been slowed. And but the
revolving loan or fund is only funded through debt repayment.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
And then we use some entitlement money, but we've used that for the program management, and that pays for the construction component. I mean, the construction management by SEPA and our staffing, like that handles intake and also does the compliance, because we have to keep track of all those loans.
And what source created the fund, the revolving fund?
It was CDBG, because what happens is when you start out with a revolving loan fund, you fund the loans, and then when they are repaid, you establish it as a revolving loan fund. And that what happens then is this is the world of HUD. It's a form of program income. But normally when you get program income in on CDBG, whatever generates the income, you spend it on the next eligible activity, whatever it is, because you have to use money that you have sitting in your bank account before you draw more funds from the federal government. But with a revolving loan fund, you in essence have identified that for a specific program, which is for making these loans for housing rehab. And that means you don't have to spend it first on anything else. So it is a way of knowing what kind of funding you are going to have to some extent for new loans in the future. Does that make sense?
Just as a reminder, what are some of the ways we typically use CDBG funding? I'm just trying to get some of those projects in my mind.
Well, of course, we use it for things like alley paving. We use it for things like, 15% of it goes to social services that the Social Services Committee gives out. We use it for code enforcement. We use it for a small amount for economic development, not that much in Evanston. That's not been a major part of our program. But overall, the most money goes into housing between the various housing, both the CDBG rehab program and code enforcement. And then the second largest amount goes into other parts of the built environment, whether it is infrastructure, which are city projects, or facilities improvements, which can be both for city facilities if they're in income eligible areas, or it can be for our nonprofits.
Okay, and the last question, does Rob know when we'll have a final answer on this?
And no, he doesn't. He's anxiously trying to get it, though.
Okay. All right, that's all, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Joanne, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I just was wondering two things. What % of people pay the loan back. And then is it usually paid when the house is sold, or do people pay some every year? Or-
No, it's usually paid when the house is sold, or when the, in some cases, that is when the owner passes away. Because we do not have, we have very few amortizing loans because the people we're helping basically can't handle debt service. That's one of the reasons we can help them. I mean, they just won't even qualify for loans for what they need to do in many cases. We get a fair number of the total loans paid back. I honestly don't have an absolute. We write off very few. We lost a few during the foreclosure period because people had loans on houses that were foreclosed upon. And of course, the foreclosure wipes all of those types of liens. But because we're always in second position at best. We do, I would say we probably get at least 80% of the loans repaid over time, but it can be very, very different periods of times. We still have some loans that were written in the 1980s.
Whoa.
Because they're titled, they're deferred, they're title transfer. So that's what, when Marion said we can't predict when we're going to get paid, that is true.
Right. Wow. Okay, Ugo, you have another question?
You left me last this time, huh?
Did.
A couple of questions. My first one is, and I'll make my questions all at once if you don't mind, whoever is going to try to answer me if there are answers. At this time, staff is unable to recommend moving to forgivable loans. What are the chances of that change, say from high to medium? If that is the case, could we get some of the literature for us to get familiar with conditions for those loans to be forgivable? What are the current conditions for the repayment of the loans? And I would then, if we're moving to forgivable loans, I would move that those loans made in the 1980s, 1990s, and maybe even up to 2010 to be automatically forgiven if that is the case, that we come to that, if possible, if doable, given that I think that somebody who lives in the property for 10 years deserves to have those loans forgivable if we are entering into that phase in our community. So those are my comments. And actually, my only question is, what are the chances of you recommending that this be moved to forgivable?
Well,
type of loans?
it really depends on finding we want to look to see if there are other sources that may become possible for us to use through our rehab program. And the IDA funds, we were hoping they would be kind of the big promise because they are the same income restrictions and that sort of stuff. But this cap on the value of the property is making it difficult because it rules out a lot of people we need to help. So we are actually currently looking at what we think we should use as the asset cap or the value cap of the house for the CDBG program. Historically, before we had started using the same one as the IDA loans, which was what we did when we started working with SEPA, we said the value of the home could not exceed 95% of the median value home in Evanston. And HUD thought that was great, but when we were monitored one time, they didn't like how we didn't have a really good source of what that median income was. So if we were to move to that, our likely recommendation would be to use the assessor's assessed value, the median assessed value that Fritz Kagi has been publicizing, that sort of thing by municipality, which didn't happen under Barrios, so we didn't have that. So, and that is, I don't remember exactly what that is right now, but it's significantly higher than the IDA cap, which is the important part, because then we would be able to help people. But one of the things that I think the committee can start to think about is we are in the second to the last year of our 5-year consolidated plan. And we are going to be doing a new consolidated plan starting for the year 2025. If we wanted to make a radical change in our use of CDBG, for example, maybe we would say, I'm exaggerating probably a bit, the most important thing is to put this money into housing. You know, the committee and the city could look and make that recommendation and change really just the way we structure our use of CDBG funding. There's nothing that says you have to fund any or all of the categories. That's the whole point of CDBG. You're supposed to have the flexibility to use the funds for what you think is most important. But then we have to look to see if we have sources for some of the other things that we've been funding. Like we have done a lot of, I think, very meaningful infrastructure improvements in our lowest income areas with alley paving and sidewalks. And we've been doing park improvements and things like that. And we do help our nonprofits maintain their facilities. And so, you know, it's always what are the priorities? And I think we would have to really put some hard thinking into that, because we could put much, much more of our money into a rehab program. But as I say, then it would, what are we giving up and where would we fund that from? So it may be also even a recommendation that this committee could make, but of course, city council would have to approve it. So it's one of those bigger financing things.
Oh, wow. So another weighty issue for us. Councilmember.
Yes, I will be very brief as it's getting late. My quick question is, Sarah, you mentioned in response to Ugo, you know, that potentially we would use the assessor's assessed value. And I'm not an expert on this by any means, but I often spend my weekend sometimes looking at the assessed values of properties in my ward and comparing that. And I've noticed that it seems as though at least what's listed on the assessor's website when you use the About My Place app on the city's website, that the assessed value seems way
lower.
Way lower. Yeah, it's way lower than what I would imagine the actual value of properties are.
No. What I'm saying is, I'm sorry, what I'm saying is what we would use as our cap would be the median assessed value, which is not to the individual property. So if you go to the assessor's website and look up Evanston, they list, and it's in our memo, and I'm trying to find it right now because
it's $540,000
yeah,
for single family
the
and
assessor's
$252 for
estimated
condos.
median market value. It's in Evanston right now is $540,000 for single family. Yeah. So it's not I'm not talking about the
assessed value of an individual property.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you for that. I was a bit concerned.
No,
because
it's
I've seen
confusing.
properties that I'm like, that's definitely a multi-million-dollar property, and it's assessed at like 300,000. I'm thinking, what the heck is going on here?
That would be tax appeals.
Yeah.
Well, the assessor's valuation is not the market price.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Right.
Is that what your hand was up about, Joanne?
What I wanted to say, that those are, we wouldn't want
right.
No play, I mean, but anyway, right.
Yeah.
The market, you know, what realtors would say it's valued at is certainly higher than what the
right, because you have the equalizers and all those things that nobody can understand. At least I can't.
Okay, well, I think we have pretty well covered all of the items on our agenda, and it's I think time for us to adjourn our meeting, and we will see you all.
And Chair, I have one other quick comment on this.
Okay.
No, it's a quick one. I just
Move
want
to adjourn.
to make sure that this comes back once we hear from Rob is all. I don't want this
Yes.
to. Yeah.
As soon as we hear from him, we will let you know what we hear. Absolutely.
Right. Thank you. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
It's
No problem.
unfinished business, so we'll bring it back. Anyway, so we are scheduled to reconvene on February 21st. And so I look forward to seeing everybody then. And I'm sure we'll have another giant packet of good material from our staff and lots of good topics to discuss. So thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay.